call us to order. I know we're still waiting on people, but we had scheduled a hearing bill on 2033, and I wanted to let you know that we had a significant issue with some of the testimony, and I thought the fairest thing to do was just to reschedule. If you were one of the people who were afraid you didn't get your testimony in on time, we are giving grace. We want to leave room for everybody. But so in case that was the whole reason you were waiting here and you had other committees you wanted to watch, I wanted to let you know so you could decide where you would really like to be today. We have a few more people that we are waiting for, so we are going to be at ease until a few more people come. But like I said, I just wanted to let you know our latest schedule change. All right. I think we have almost everybody that we were expecting, and in the interest of respecting schedules, we'll go ahead and get started. And the first item on our agenda is bill introductions. Do we have any bill introductions? Representative Chauncey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to introduce 25 RS 0587, which was brought forth by Speaker Pro Tem Carpenter, a bill allowing military students in district to enroll prior to arrival with proof of residence in the state.
Thank you very much. That bill is germane. Is there any objection? Seeing none, your bill is introduced. Thank you very much, Representative Chauncey. Do we have any other bills to introduce? Lieutenant Colonel Marshall.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Lieutenant Colonel Keith Marshall. On behalf of the Adjutant General's Department, I have 25 RS 0061, an act concerning education relating to the National Guard.
Thank you very much. That is germane. Is there any objection to accepting this bill? Seeing none, you are introduced. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you. Are there any other bill introductions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move along. We did a great job of being very engaged on the last time Dr. Lane was here presenting the literacy plan, and we did not get to the last page, which was the budget, and we mostly didn't get to the second phase of it, and so she was gracious to come back today. Dr. Lane, please come forward, and you guys have all of her hearing material from the last time that she was here. If you can't find it, it should be available to you on the S drive. And Dr. Lane, if you'd like to walk us through the budget, and then we'll open up for questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's great to be back with you today. At any point you need me to return, I'll be glad to do so. If I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to introduce some key colleagues that are here today in case there are questions from a university perspective.
Yes, you may.
So with us today is President of Washburn University, Dr. Julie Mazachek. Also, Dr. Zach Frank, who is...
And would your guests like to stand with their...
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. President Mazachek. Also with us is Dr. Zach Frank, who is the Dean of the Applied Studies College at Washburn University. And last but not least, Dr. Carolyn Carlson, who is one of our professors of literacy, expert in literacy, and has been leading a lot of the work that the Blueprint's doing around course development. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And at the end of your presentation, if you will make sure that Michelle has the proper names and titles of your guests, that will help us greatly.
I'd be glad to do so. So I'm pleased to come back to talk about the financing for the centers in particular. But if you would just allow me just to set the stage for a reminder that the centers are one key strategy of the Blueprint, a significant strategy, a long-term sustainability so we can ensure moving forward our educators have ongoing, high-quality professional learning support, and that we support our families who may have children that are struggling to learn to read. So keeping that in mind, in the progress report, the very last page of that, you have a comprehensive budget for the Blueprint. But today we'll be talking and focusing on the budget for the Literacy Centers Plan, which is on the last page of the plan for the centers. So if you all have that in front of you, then we can talk about how the budget was developed, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have. As a refresher, we are recommending that we establish 7 centers of excellence in literacy that are regionally located throughout Kansas. And you can be reminded by looking at the catchment map of where those centers will be located. The advisory committee created a framing document, and from that framing document, sent it out to the field and invited all educator preparation program, accredited programs to apply. The 7 public universities did so. And so each of those universities are now assigned to what we call a catchment area. And that's important in the budgetary process, because if you look at that map, which is also included in your materials, you'll see that our catchment areas are very diverse in geography, and they're also very diverse in the number of teachers and the number of students. So when we thought about budgeting, 3 things came to mind. One, if you recall, the Blueprint is built on 3 constructs: shared expertise, required elements, and the uniqueness of the catchment areas. So the advisory committee put forth that plan, got a lot of feedback from the field about what should be included in the plan, and then the budgeting process was developed around one aspect of those 3 constructs, which is the required elements. The shared expertise and the uniquenesses, those supports come directly from the universities. So it's a shared funding model. State funding to help us get stood up, and universities' investment in the centers as well. And then eventually, by year 3, we hope to be bringing forward to you grants and a private funding relationship. So the budget that you see in front of you is focused on those required elements. In the plan, you'll find those required elements in that long timeline that articulates exactly what each center must do. And so the budget was designed to ensure that centers had funding to stand up the required elements. And in the startup period, which is the spring of 2025, this fiscal year, each center was allocated $314,000 to start. And then you can see, looking at that, year 1, we expect full implementation of all the indicators. Each center has $1.1 million, and then that amount increases till we get to year 4. Now, I mentioned that equity is important. So we have 2 catchment areas, 2 centers, if you will, that will receive some additional support. That would be catchment area 6, which is KU's catchment area, and they serve Johnson, Wyandotte, Douglas, and Franklin counties. You can see that on the map of the catchments. So giving them the same resources that we are allocating to Fort Hays was not equitable because they have 196,000 students that they're trying to support in addition to a large amount of teachers. So on top of that base amount, the University of Kansas will get $160,000 additional dollars so they can hire additional literacy coaches. So the construct around the budget, and I'd be glad to answer specific questions, is what's required, recognizing the universities will bring forward expertise from the shared piece, not funded currently by the blueprint, and then how do we adjust somewhat for the unique needs. Now this is a proof of project funding model. I want to anticipate for you moving forward that additional resources are going to be needed in order to achieve the goals set forth by the blueprint. Remember, we are striving to have 100% of our elementary workforce trained in structured literacy by 2030, and that we see truly transformational achievement changes in our young people that by 2033, 90% will be scoring at level 2 or higher on the state assessment. So these are proof of project, proof of concept, if you will, funding models so we can get started, learn more, adjust, and create other partnerships for funding moving forward. So with that high-level overview, Madam Chair, I'd be glad to answer questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions for Dr. Layton? Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Dr. Lane, for coming back today and responding to my email with some questions I had. So go through this in my mind, the budget going forward. We got $2.7 million per year for tuition that we agreed to pay for. If you go down below in section number 4, in fiscal year 2026, you have $7.6 million for personnel. So we're talking over $10 million a year. Why wouldn't the tuition be paying for the personnel cost? Why are we paying both? If you follow what I'm asking, because I would think tuition would be paying the teacher because that's what we're paying tuition for. So why do we have another $7.6 million for personnel costs that I'm assuming are the instructors?
So I want to make sure that I'm responding to what you're looking at.
Okay.
And it sounds to me like what you're looking at is the overarching blueprint budget, not the budget for the centers. Is that correct? At the top of that page, it says resource allocation and alignment with blueprint priorities.
Yes.
Okay, that is the overarching full scope budget of how we're currently funding blueprint priorities, all of them, not just the centers. So I'd be glad to answer your question, but I want to just make sure that the center's budget is a separate document that is in the center's plan, last page of the center's plan, and it's titled Multi-Year Budget for the Centers.
Okay, Okay.
So we had two reports that came forward, and I appreciate the confusion. But let me answer your questions. If the committee would find the resource allocation alignment, and Madam Chair, I happen to bring hard copies of both these budgets, if that would help to make sure that we're all looking at the same document.
Would anybody like hard copies?
Okay.
Michelle, could you assist, please? Thank you.
All right.
These should be the same as the ones we saw
This is the
last
budget
week.
for the
I
centers.
think
I'll
with
give
us
to you,
coming off the
Michelle.
floor
This
as
is the
fast as
budget
we
for the
did, you probably
blueprint.
didn't have a chance to grab them. So thank you, Dr. Lane.
I should have color-coded those pages. Thank you so much.
Okay, and now that we are on the same page, or pages, Dr. Lane, please go ahead and answer the question.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Moving forward, perhaps separating two reports would be a helpful change in the law. So Representative McNorton, your question is about the overarching budget. And so may I just walk you through how this budget comes together, and perhaps I'll get to your answer. The first part, you'll see, if you're reminded, I talked last week about the requirements come in kind of buckets or categories, one of which is that we're required to develop courses that focus on structured literacy education for teachers who are in the classroom. We call that the Foundations course. And so you can see that the very first section in FY25 has $2.6 million set aside to pay for tuition and stipends for educators to take that course, including paras. And then there's $7,000 allocated for university faculty who also may desire to take an approved course to have the credential in structured literacy. Now, I want to make sure before I move on that answered your question. And then the out years, you can see how we expect that to move forward.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you, Dr. Lane, for clarifying.
Now, the funding amounts were based on 1,500 in-service educators annually taking our Foundations course. And you recall that Dr. Watson talked about the numbers of educators taking letters. So we are looking at how do we then provide an option for educators not in letters so they too can achieve it. So that's what that course is about, and we pay the tuition and a stipend for Kansas educators, primarily focused on pre-K through 8. The next section is micro-credential development and design. In order to develop and design this new, high-quality structured literacy course that provides coaching for teachers, and we had to spend some time developing that course. And so you can see there's course development allocated there, of $227,000, and instructional design, that's the technology piece and the ability to make that accessible online. So once that is developed, you see those costs over time fading out because the course is there, the design, the learning management system is there, all of that is in place. Program evaluate, yes, sir.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you want to wait till the end, or?
Well, we were at the end of that first budget, and I'm sitting here number crunching Representative McNorton's previous question. We know that we have 5,237 in-service teachers, and you're estimating 1,500 per year. Does that correlate with the total number of students enrolled in the College of Education in the relevant degrees?
That number is solely for teachers already practicing in classrooms. The undergraduates is not taking this foundations course because that's built into their curriculum. So that's a very important
That's not
distinction.
exactly my question, okay? We know that of current teachers, from your testimony and the pages you went through, and you said, here's how many elementary teachers we have, how many have completed letters, how many are in the process of letters. And you estimated that there are about 5,237 teachers left.
That's correct.
So you're saying the centers can handle 1,500 of those per year?
So when we get to the center's budget, I can show you that. We base the allocation for literacy coaches on that number, 1,500 per year. And it gets us close. We're about 1,470, so it's not quite the 15.
Okay.
Providing additional allocations would have us meet or exceed that number.
Okay, so my next question is, so this will, I think, help people understand the budget. How many students in the degrees that we are covering through the blueprint are there in the 7 region centers? Do we know that total number? Custom, we're not holding you to an exact number, but typically how many students do those universities have enrolled each year?
I can tell you that enrolled totally in education programs, not specific to elementary and not specific to literacy, 5,000, just over 5,000 enrolled currently in our university system. Now, that does not include the independent colleges, so there would be an additional number enrolled there. But enrolled in education programs, about 5,000.
Thank you. Representative McNorton, do you want to ask your question again? I think I helped you get the information you were looking for your question, and then we had Representative Steele in her in my pipeline.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Dr. Steele, so just a question on developing the credential or the teaching. So we're already teaching, and the current students at the universities are graduating with the science of reading, letters training.
That's correct, undergraduate.
So can we not use that same structure, classroom instruction that we're using for them for our existing teachers without spending more money to create another program? It seems like that program's already there.
This program is specifically designed for educators who already have a background and have been practicing. Some of the basic foundational knowledge is the same. The key difference is a required component. There's a performance assessment and also required component that I take the skill that I'm learning and I apply it with the children in my classroom. So that really elevates it as more in-depth, thank you so much, more in-depth for teachers who are already practicing. What we're learning, if I may, is many of the elements in this new graduate level course, we will go back and reshape our undergraduate program to see how much stronger alignment we can make there.
Representative Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lane, for being here today. I'm trying to figure out where to start because I do have a couple different questions. Is that okay, or do you want me to do one and come back?
For right now, let's please stay focused on budget.
Yeah, they are budget.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Why is the director salary or wage or whatever increasing by almost $100,000?
Point me to where you're looking, so I'm looking at.
I am looking at the Centers for Excellent multi-year budget. The startup was 95K approximately, and now we're wanting 191.7K.
Those are on the high end, those numbers are. It's for a half year of work, so that the first full year in 26, it shows an increase showing a full-time, full 12-month FTE. Now, I can tell you that as the budgets come in from the universities, that director level number is significantly lower. We wanted to make sure we had a bandwidth in here that would accommodate various salary schedules at our universities. So we can show you that, Representative Steele, as we get the precise budgets from the universities, which are coming in this week and next week. We can give you a more precise salary amount for directors.
Oh, thank you. So what is the difference between the foundation, the literacy coach foundations course, learning, clinical directors? Those are all needed for every center? I'm concerned about allocations there.
Great question. As we looked at the proposals that came back from the universities, they identified these similar job responsibilities as necessary to provide a wide range of coaching and professional learning support. Keep in mind that the literacy coaches will be both teaching class in the center and going out into the community. So that's why you have two different levels of coaches there. You have one specific for the course that Representative McNorton's question tied to, the foundations course, and then we have other coaches available to help teachers who maybe went through letters but want some more coaching support. The other positions allow us to ensure that we have high-quality, ongoing professional learning for leaders, for school psychs, for speech pathologists, all the educators that are involved in a child's literacy development. So we actually have job descriptions for each of those positions. Be glad to share that with you if interested.
That would be great. I am. And my last question is, I mean, I know it's a small number, but is a student intern necessary when we really need to be looking at making sure we have money in classrooms? Is a student intern a necessary expenditure?
That's really workforce development. Get the student intern in who may be studying a field in the education realm, develop their skills, so when they are out in the workforce, they have that strong background. That's really the impetus behind that.
I have more, but I'll hold. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Hill, I have you on the list. Representative Hill, and then Representative Chauncey is on next. Anybody else want on the list?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lane, for being here again and putting up with some of us that are a little slow. Looking through, and I'm looking more through the literacy budget plan because I'm trying to I understand that the Centers of Excellence budget fits into this budget, right? And then we break that out in the other form.
Yes, sir.
And the literacy education, the structured literacy education, that is directed towards current teachers, is that correct, or?
That's
okay.
correct.
And so then what is different, the micro-credentials is just the development of the materials for that instruction? Is that what?
That's correct.
What that section is there, okay?
If I may, really, the term micro-credential, it is a credential because there's nothing micro about this course. Six credit hours, right?
Choice of your words, not mine.
I understand.
So the structured literacy education is to get those 5,000 teachers that are still out there. Now, so then the thing I'm kind of having a hard time understanding, the centers that are in this budget, okay, we're educating the people that are in education programs currently. We have educated everybody in the field through the structured literacy. What are the centers?
Centers are the long-term sustainability. So as we learn more and the science changes, we never have to rely on a publisher to tell Kansas teachers how to meet the needs of children. So, and part of that answer is deliberate, reminding us how we got here. So this is to build ongoing workforce capacity to train educators long-term. And as we learn more, as children's needs change, the centers help support school districts to meet those needs.
So when you say long-term, what does long-term mean?
Many states have centers that have been in place for 20 and 30 years that help support research, develop curriculum, and provide professional learning. So our model is to focus mostly on the workforce development and helping families, and we think this is something that Kansas should have in place infinitum. This is a key support for ensuring that we're developing our educators with the latest skills that they need in the classroom. And that's really dependent on the children that you have. So that's why locating the centers regionally and having the centers have deep understanding of the regions which they serve, they can design that unique approach to meet the needs of the children in their area.
So the anticipation is that the recently credentialed teachers that are in the field right now that we've credentialed in the last 4 years, and the recently graduated teachers that are going through our institutions are immediately going to need to go back to the centers to get re-educated because the science has changed already?
I don't know that I would use the word immediate, but there is need for ongoing professional learning to deepen practice. So that we're always at the top of our skill set, that we have access to the latest, and that coaching support. As you are aware, helping a child learn to read is very difficult, and every one of us in this room needs a different level of support. And so the centers, the universities, if I may, the universities are committing to provide ongoing support to our educators long-term, beyond the letters training, beyond this course, foundations, developing other courses that help educators, but also we need to be thinking about what do teachers in special education need? This course is designed as a foundation. It will not meet all the needs of a special educator. What do teachers who teach children of second languages need? What do our school psychologists need in order to effectively evaluate children? So it's that ongoing infrastructure, if you will, to make sure that Kansans are educating Kansans so all our children can learn to read.
Thank you very much for answering my question.
Representative Chauncey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I just want to clarify a couple things on budget. Just to touch on what Representative Hill has stated, our teachers are coming out required with these credentials now, correct?
That's correct.
All education. And we have approximately 5,000, give or take, that need to get the training still? Is that the numbers we're at?
You look at, and that chart is in your center's plan.
Yeah,
The page before your center's budget, we articulated how many are in the available training letters, anticipating that they will all complete, and then what's the gap? How many educators remain that are neither enrolled or have not completed letters that we need to serve?
Right, but that wouldn't be part of the budget because if we're not enrolled,
about
we can't just go
5,000.
out. We can't just go out and grab them. I mean, we have to find somewhere to get those teachers. I mean, I understand that we have a shortage of teachers. I completely understand that. But my problem with the whole thing, I guess, is that you're asking to set up some centers requiring our teachers to come to the centers for additional training after they've been trained and asking us to say, well, we're going to give you $13 million a year to run these centers after we've already made a retirement. Can't we do something more of a peer-to-peer or maybe a in-service type training rather than requiring the teachers to come into these centers and spending this amount of money burdening our taxpayers when we already spend over 50% of our budget on education the way it is. So that's a concern for me, requiring us to or asking for us to continually fund this, and yet we don't have any benchmarks between now and 2030 to show us progress as to where if we're meeting our goal, if we're achieving what we're trying to achieve. And so it's hard for me as a representative in a district which is primary, our number one educator, our number one employer is education, to say, we're going to require all this, we're going to give you all this money, but you guys got to go to Topeka, to Washburn for your training once a month, once a week, whatever the requirement be, 12 hours of training, whatever your continuing ed requirements are. And so for me, it doesn't sit well requesting this amount of money to require everybody to go into a center and then turn around and ask it for a continual basis, because eventually we get the teachers where they need to be. And I granted there's continuing ed, but with continuing ed, is it going to cost us that $13 million, or are we just paying for an administrator to sit there and say, I'm going to do this and make sure that our teachers are where they need to be?
There's a lot there, Representative Chauncey, so let me try to unpack. First thing, the centers sound like a place you go to, but the centers are a network, and they are required to be out in the communities, in the school districts, supporting teachers where they are. There also will be times when they pull teachers together into a space and provide the professional learning. But we are in no way saying that teachers have to come to the center. The centers and their staff and all of those positions go to the schools and provide the supports that the teachers in those buildings desire, want, and need for their children. So that's key. We have one center of reading in Kansas now that focuses, the Center of Reading at Pitt State, as you may be aware, that focuses on the family side, the evaluation and assessment. Their budget is about $700,000 annually. What we're doing is taking what we've learned from that expertise and adding the educator workforce component on that. So it is an investment in ongoing high-quality learning that you don't have to travel to, that is committed to come to where you are to help you with your children and the needs in that building. So I know there was more in the question, so if you would like to reshape that, maybe bring that back, I'd love to address all of those concerns that you have. But the key thing, the centers are not, you have to go to a center to get support. The staff are committed to being in the community.
Okay.
Representative Chauncey, is your question answered?
I guess that still doesn't really answer my question. So if they are coming out to teachers more like an in-service training, say, is it a group of teachers together, or is it, do we get the whole school and have a day of in-service where we educate all our reading teachers, literacy teachers, or? And with that being said, is it something that, I just have a hard time with the numbers. The numbers just seem like, to me, we're spending an exorbitant amount of money to ensure something that we're requiring as a Board of Regents for our educators to now get, and try to bring our educators up to speed with this current science that we've learned, I guess, of phonetical language and that goes with it, which I believe when I was 40 years ago, when you started education, with all due respect, I started learning with phonetical language in South Dakota in elementary school. I know it's changed, but we kind of went away from that, now we're going back to it. So it seems like we're going full circle to be, and just pouring a bunch more money in to get us back full circle to where we started 40 years ago.
I'm really pleased to hear that you had that experience when some of us did not. But structured literacy is much deeper than phonics. And it requires that every child have individual, direct, and explicit instruction. So it's very intensive work. In order to be an expert in that, we're going to need ongoing support of our teachers. This is not a go through one training program and all of our children will learn to read. So the point of the centers is to be in there, invested with our educators and our communities to try to solve moving forward, to make sure our children are literate. So we see it as an investment in the workforce, the educator workforce, and in our children, because the science has changed and it will keep changing, and the intensity needed to provide that coaching is much more than an in-service day. The research shows, and I know educators in here will tell you, that going to an in-service sitting for a day does nothing to change practice. We're not talking about that. We're talking about elbow to elbow, over the shoulder. I'm watching what's happening in your classroom. I'm helping to design a plan for your children, coaching. Very different, almost like a medical model where the intern and the fully qualified doctor are working side by side. That's what this is, supporting teachers. So,
One last follow-up on that real quick, and I know it's not about budget, but if I may, Madam Chair, just real quick.
Very, very quick, because we do have a long queue.
Yeah, okay, just real quick, you're saying we have to meet the specific needs of every single one, but the burden on that teacher then falls with having 20 kids in their classroom that we're not necessarily able to fulfill the specific needs, and so that was just a question on that. How do we address that?
that as a former superintendent, that's a daily challenge. How do you reduce class size? That's a daily challenge that we face. I don't have any answer for you on that, but it is something that I recognize as a concern. But what we're saying is that we want to provide support so teachers can be successful with all their children.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative Wolf.
Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'm going to piggyback on what he said for clarification for me, and then I'll ask my question. And that is, okay, so the teachers aren't coming to you, and you already have these centers. Are we hiring a bunch of new people to train them? Is that where, or are they still just doing a job they've been doing, but now they're going to go out and do it?
These positions require full-time focus. So the positions that you see outlined in the center's budget are the required positions that every center must have. And so
They don't have them already.
most not. Most of the faculty are teaching courses, and some may continue to do that and also support in the centers. But the center staff, the capacity building, we believe, is at a level that needs the intensity of full-time focus.
So you'll be hiring additional people in those centers to go out to the schools?
We'll be hiring folks to fill the positions that are in the budget. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then at the very beginning, you said something about 100% of employees trained by 2030, and then I see you do have some on here for para positions. What kind of training would they get, and how do you keep that going as you lose them and hire new ones? Because I know the turnover is very large.
If there's time later and the chair allows, Washburn has an excellent program for paraprofessionals. They need similar but not the same training because they may not have the background. And you're right, that constant turnover is part of it. Part of making sure they have the skills so they feel successful and they don't leave, but also responding to that. So we do have funding for paras. That goal is in the law. Senate Bill 438, that 100% of our elementary educator workforce has a credential by 2030.
So you will have someone come out and train them before they start, or it'll happen ongoing? And I mean, at the dollar amount I see here, it can't be too extensive, but I know they are one-on-one with students a lot.
That has to be determined between the center staff and the school district. How do we make that work? And we design that individually. So part of the center strength is that it's not cookie cutter. They're not all going to say, here's our package, this is what we want to do for you. The centers have to meet with the districts and design their approach based on what their districts and their catchment areas say they need.
Representative Wolf, when we were talking about this last year, one of the things that was brought up is that often that overcrowding is dealt with paras, and they're not trained on how to help teach reading. So that's what elevated that up as being important.
And it needs to be, so thank you.
Right, but I think you're saying you're missing the hows on how that happens.
Yeah.
So thank you. Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Lane, for being here. I guess I'm kind of thinking about that real-world experience, and as you have walked us through kind of the development of this process, starting at the university level, and I totally respect all of the university professors in delivering this experientially based reading experience for candidates. And then that next phase of taking that possibly to your admin or training levels, maybe it's a service center and such, out to the district, and then teachers. From my own experience being at the higher ed level, and then being at a state training level, and then I just completed 90 days of a classroom teacher, it's different. So if you're taking your candidates and leaving them at the higher ed and doing these simulations, and it sounds like you are giving them the opportunity to be out in the schools, that's going to be really vital, because the experience that they are going to be engaging in at the school level is quite different from what we delivered to them in an experientially based classroom at the university level. On that same instant, we have shortages of teachers out there, and I know that in the period of time that I was teaching recently, I could have used an extra set of hands in my classroom that was maybe practicing one skill of reading that I could actually place them with students in my room. I would encourage that these candidates are in the classroom more than they are not, and that they are focused on those skills, that they're engaging in that real-world experience, not at the university, but in that classroom. because they probably will, they don't have that time when they jump in as a first-year teacher. They're jumping in with both feet. And it's vastly different than when I was in the classroom before. So having those experiences, I want to encourage you that it's a real-world experience, not a simulation from a computer, AI, whatever it is, but it's in that classroom, getting the experience from those teachers, because the teachers are the experts. They're dealing with the behaviors and everything else in that classroom with reading. Those candidates may be working with a small group, teaching reading to a degree, so they have to be able to manage that and know what that real experience is, because they may decide that's not what I want, and they'll catch that experience early. I just want to encourage you to not use the computer model and such, but give them that real world experience in the classroom and use the resources in the schools and the classroom that are already engaged in teaching reading and teaching the letters or whatever. And hopefully you've combined the letters and such as a more unified experience so that the teachers can understand where the candidates are coming from. But I just want to share that piece. It's quite different now. And
Do we have a question?
that's my question statement.
Thank you. Representative, did you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolute 100% agreement that our teaching candidates need real-world experience. And one of the things that the advisory committee is engaged in is strategic planning, in which that very conversation is part of it. How much clinical in the real-world setting do educators need in an undergraduate program? So thank you for the comment.
Representative Getz, then Featherston, and then Schmoy.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lane, for coming back and hanging out with us again. So mine is, I really appreciate all the kind of almost the details of the how. I appreciate that. I guess my question is a little bit in a different direction. I did just a little bit of quick math. I used that last number, and you talked about there's these models in other states that have been in existence for 30 years. Mm-hmm. So at a 10-year spot, it would be 138 million. It's pretty easy to add some zeros to get to that. And I guess where my mind is the investment from the state, and it is I think the return on investment for students reading well in an economic mindset, just that, will be astronomical. I think if this works, then the return for our culture and families and everything is way more than 138 million. So I'm there with you on that. I guess to then move it out into the 20, 30-year marks, I would be more comfortable going into it with a set measurement of the goals of achievement that you're hoping for, that then if it's, and I'm kind of thinking along representative from Finney County, just let's trust but verify. Let's have some set outcomes that if we invest this and you guys do a great job, which I think you'll work through kinks and you'll work through different things, but that we have, here's the set outcomes that at the 10 or 12-year mark, whatever it is, that then if those are met, we go on to the next 10 years. And we advertise this to other states and we take it. But then if it's on the other side, that's the success side, on the just didn't quite do what we hoped that it would, then maybe there's a decrease or a readjustment. And there's, you see kind of what I'm saying. I wonder if I haven't read that somewhere, and it may be in the plan of here's the projected outcomes at a 10-year mark, and then we can plan for the future from there. I guess this is all going to last a lot longer than most of us, and I hope it does. And I would just wonder what your comments would be around success measurements that could be set in the first couple years of implementing this that then could be checked back on in a very clear way to establish future investment in the same program or in alternate?
I really appreciate the question. And you might recall I described the budget for the centers as a proof of, it's a concept. Right now, we think, and we have high energy and investment from universities, and the advisory committee believes this is an important strategy to help support teachers long-term. If not this, something. We need to do something more. Letters is terrific and powerful, it's knowledge, but it is knowledge. What we're saying is this is an application. So in terms of the goals, we have the goal by 2033 that 90% of our children will be reading at a level 2 or higher on the state assessment, and that 50% will be of those 90 will be reading at 3 and 4. That is an aggressive goal. The work that the advisory committee in strategic planning that we started last month, remember this is month 6 of the project, is to identify what are those benchmarks. Where do we have to be when in order to come to you to say this investment matters, or no, we need to make a change. So I'm not asking you to commit forever, although that was the question. We need something long-term because our current strategy will make an impact, but will it get it where we need to go? I'm not sure. But hold us accountable. We'll hold the universities accountable. They want to do this work. That's why this representative group is here, because they're vested in that. So we need to set benchmarks. You can expect that over the next 3 months, that the advisory committee will set those. I'll be able to come share with you what those are. And the other benchmark is that training benchmark for educators, for the foundational knowledge. And then we have to have the conversation, what do they need next, right? That's got to be it. So hold us accountable for that. See this as an investment with requirements. That's how this has to be viewed.
Thank you. Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lane, for being here. It's so exciting to be on the cusp of this big movement that was so supported by the legislature, the universities, the teachers last year. I mean, it's great to be here. My question is, could you give us some kind of vision of what family supports will look like? There's so many things at the home that affect what we can achieve at the school, and it'd just be interesting to know the committee's vision for what that might be if you've made it that far in the planning process.
Yes, thank you very much. So if you know anything about the Center of Reading, they've been in place for 30 years, and they are renowned for their engagement with families who have struggling readers. So the model is to try to replicate that sort of model across the state with this one caveat. We believe our role is building the capacity of school districts to be able to clearly identify and provide literacy intervention plans for the children in their school. So it's a hand-in-hand, hand-in-glove model. We also have the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center on our advisory committee, and the work that they do there with families is very powerful. And so they're helping to design what, between the Center of Reading and Phillips, working with universities about what that family support should look like. We do believe strongly that our job is to build the capacity of the school districts, help the school districts do this work well. And so it's always with the school district that we put those things forward. Assessments, evaluations, literacy plans, identification of children with dyslexia, other reading needs, and then just in general, literacy development for families. And what should families know about where should my child be when? There was a great question I heard when Commissioner Watson was here, is how do we know our children are doing well when the language we use to describe performance is below basic, basic, and all of that? So our commitment, Representative Featherston, is to provide evidence-based support for families in collaboration that makes sense, actionable for families, and so the children are successful.
Thank you.
Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of questions. First off, just as clarification on the multi-year budget, Centers for Excellence, under personnel, the center director, is that one person or is that a director for all 7 centers, like each?
Each center will have a director.
Okay, and this is the total amount?
Those are informed estimates, but as I see the budgets coming in, that amount will decrease in terms of that salary line. But in essence, every center will have a director. That director's main job is the community engagement, working with school districts and making sure that the centers are going to the districts. So each one will have their own.
Okay, Madam Chair, if I may.
I'd like clarification on the answer you got. So I
Yes.
just want to be sure, you're saying the 191,000 is not for one center director, but all 7? If you look at the multi-year Centers of Excellence budget.
Thank you, and you're right. That is the 7, the multi-year budget reflects all 7 centers. But each line item is discrete. So the total that you can see there, the total per center, you can see the amount in bold going across. It's about 3/4 of the way down the page. But each position, those are individual position funding. But I do think that the amount we projected for the director is high.
You may continue, Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, has there been any conversation around the idea that as we're training these teachers who are then taking it to their home school and kind of mentoring throughout the year in their home school, is there any projection that you're going to compensate those teachers who are kind of peer mentoring in their schools?
That's a great question. As you see the detailed plans coming forward from the universities, many of them are building in stipends for teachers to become what they call literacy fellows so that they can be key points out in school buildings to support.
Would that come from this budget?
It will come from this budget in through the center's budget. So it's a layer cake. This is a high-level budget. You'll see the operational budgets from each university. And so I emailed to you today an example from Washburn that has the budget that will show those kinds of details and specifically how, because I know this committee wants to know, how are you doing this? Well, I want you to see those plans because in the university plans, we are requiring that they specify how and their specific funding.
Okay, I think the collaboration is phenomenal. I really enjoy seeing all the schools work together and make sure that our teachers in the schools are doing a good job. I am a little concerned that given the projections out and the length of time before we get actual data, that we're basically micromanaging how our universities are teaching our teachers at the taxpayers' expense. So that's just a concern I have.
I'd like more insight. Maybe we could speak later about the micromanaging and how you see that. Because what we want to do is say, here's what we need to accomplish. You tell us how you can do that. So it's kind of a defined autonomy, if you will. But they have to meet our expectations. So let's talk more.
Thank you, Representative McNorton, then Steele, then Pishner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to make sure I understand, so the Center for Reading at Pittsburgh is part of Pittsburgh State? Is that
Correct.
right? Okay. So they have a budget, you said, of $750,000 a year?
700,000.
Yeah, 700, yeah, big difference. 750,000 a year. You're proposing 1.1, something like that for these new centers. But my real question is, how is this going to be different? So I'm assuming right now that all of our colleges, universities that are teaching educators have a program for continuing education, or I'm assuming they do. So our teachers go and get continuing education. So how is that different than what we're proposing, and what are the universities and colleges, are they going to do away with theirs and save us money there that we can put towards this program? Are we double dipping?
The centers work in partnership with what is referred to as the education preparation programs and the master's degree program. So not duplicating, working in partnership. It's a matter of intensity of application and coaching. That comes from the centers. So that you take what you learn in your master's program, involve yourself with a coach from the center to take your skill to a higher level of expertise in your classroom. So it is that is that expert level of coaching that is different as an add-on. But it's working in partnership. We need more. We haven't solved this problem with our current resource, so we believe we need to go more deeper into the application, and that's what this is about.
So, two different things. We're talking about not a master's degree, we're talking about continuing education for our current teachers to be able to get the science of reading, or letters, or whatever we're teaching. Not a master's degree or something that a college is going to teach. So, right, are they teaching continuing education right now in reading, colleges?
We may be splitting hairs when you say continuing ed, but our colleges absolutely offer courses in the science of reading to teachers who are already in the classroom. They may not have the coaching component.
Okay, so if I could just, so just so are we going to have a new center for math, 7 new centers around the state for math, new centers for science, another new bunch of centers for whatever we want to come up with, subject, and spend another $10, $15 million per subject to be able to keep up with the latest and greatest in those fields, in your opinion?
My opinion is no. 2 reasons. Reading is the skill that underpins all of those, and when we show the level of intensity required to become a true expert in teaching literacy skills, then the things that we learn can be translated into how we develop educators, period, in existing programs.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lane. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do any schools have to pay to receive this training?
No.
So no schools in the state of Kansas are paying anything for any of this training, curriculum, any of that?
The foundations course, by law, is at low or no cost to educators in Kansas.
What is low?
Well, we've had that debate, and so the Board of Regents passed a market rate tuition that they will pay and have said to the universities, no fees. So low is 0. Or it might be $25 for an application fee, but it will not be significant at all.
So you said universities, I'm talking local public schools. When they send educators to get this training to come back to the schools, are they paying for any of this?
This is a teacher to university process. Now, we do have school districts who've reached out that are interested in having their teachers go through the process. That the payment will be for the tuition for the teacher through the blueprint.
So public schools are using their funds to pay for this?
The blueprint pays for the foundations course. The funding that you have allocated pays for the foundation course for every Kansas teacher that is early childhood through grade 8. And the paraprofessionals.
Okay. Can we get, none of your information has any FTEs associated with it. Would it be possible to request FTEs with this?
In terms of the center's budget?
All of this, when we look at budgets from other departments, we have FTEs with it, and there's no FTEs. My concern is I hear from constituents that we spend a lot of money and allocate a lot of money to administration and personnel issues when the funds aren't going directly to the classroom, so I'm trying to be accountable to my constituents.
I understand. In the center's plans, every university will tell us how many FTEs. It's explicit there, so we'll be sure when those plans are approved by the advisory committee that you get to see those. They are FTE based. In terms of the overarching budget for the blueprint, I'll provide those numbers to you. The FTE amount is very small. There's 3 people on my team.
One more question, Madam Chair. Is it possible to, as you said, I agree 110% with you that reading is absolutely vital. You cannot be a successful citizen in our society without reading. We need benchmarks to hold this accountable.
Agreed.
Do you have a plan in place to get those soon?
Yes, by April, you'll have the benchmarks. The
Thank you.
strategic planning process that's currently underway will get us those benchmarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to Representative Pishney, and I'm sorry, I apologize. I said your name incorrectly. And then I'm going to ask one, and then we'll go back to McNorton, because you've had the most.
Madam Chair, that's not a problem on the name. I was a basketball official for years. I was called a lot of things, so that's not a problem. And I know that Madam Chair wants to hear questions, and I believe, even though I'm going to make some statements, you'll hear some questions embedded in them for you, for which you can respond. The person that's the barometer for me with anything education related is my wife, who was in the elementary classroom for 30 years and full-time, and over 10 years part-time. So I took the materials to her for several of the handouts that we've had in this committee, including the blueprint. And she looked through that and gave me her cursory feedback, and that is, oh, maybe it's another fad that's sitting in my file cabinet back in the school that I left. And I know that you have addressed that, and the what do we call it, structured literacy, I can't think of the terminology, the science of that. But we're concerned, and she's mostly concerned, that we might have another fad to try to do something that should have been done years ago, and we can't go back and undo, and that's in the past. We learn from it and go forward. I understand that. So help me understand better so that I can help her understand better, as well as all my other constituents, how this is, and I know you've touched on this with your original presentation, but even I want to have you emphasize a little bit more how this is not a fad, how this is something that we can count on being long-lasting and not just temporary. And then secondly to that, I know she had to go through, and I can't remember if it was every 2 years, 5 years, I don't remember the time frame, but recertification to keep her license, and she did enough of that. She could have had her master's. She didn't apply it to a master's. But in that recertification process that's required of teachers, can this be embedded into that?
Those are really powerful questions. Let me answer the second one first. You remember Commissioner Watson talking about the seal of literacy. That's structured literacy. It has to be a structured literacy approved training program, letters. He mentioned 2 others, and we believe this one will be approved for that too. So that ongoing training for certification and licensure, the state board, that's under their purview, and they have that in place. In terms of the science, I really appreciate the feedback and the response from your wife, and we should be skeptical. I was in the classroom a long time leading a school district where we vested everything into balanced literacy, which we were told at the time would meet the needs of all children. We learned that that science was faulty. That's why I think the centers are essential, so we can evaluate methodologies for ourselves in Kansas to be sure. But structured literacy has a track record now of about 10 years of deep research by the experts like Reed Lyon, Louisa Moats, and some of the top field, and from the International Dyslexia Association, which is the premier of how educator programs are now developed. And they're telling us without a doubt structured literacy is necessary for children with dyslexia and beneficial to all. So I think we can have high confidence, but we always should trust and verify, as my colleague here said.
And just a quick comment, a personal privilege, if you will. We have a granddaughter with dyslexia, so I understand how diagnosis of that is important early on, and then how to help them. So I do appreciate that from my personal perspective. Thank you very much.
Service.
Thank you. Dr. Lane, this wasn't the original question I was going to ask you, but it did kind of pop into my head, and I usually tell you what my concerns are privately, so I apologize that this one is new, but it really literally did occur to me as I was sitting here looking at this budget. I remember a proviso, and I think it might have been Senator Baumgardner who offered it or had pushed this, that we don't have this money pay for course redesigns. And when I look at your blueprint for literacy budget plan, I see instruction design and course development on here at a very significant cost the first 3 years. Jason, would you please read what I'm referring to refresh all of our memories?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 438 and appropriating the $10 million for fiscal year '25 did have a proviso that read that no expenditures shall be made by the above agency or any university from such account for the development of such courses or assessments.
So my question is that going to the universities, what you have in this budget section?
That proviso was specifically linked, I believe, and Jason can clarify, to the undergraduate courses that had to be designed and stood up by August of '24. So that the undergraduate courses had the proviso. These are master level courses. So that's how we've seen the difference. Now, if we've been an error in that, we will certainly readjust.
I'd like more time to weigh in on that and do my fair share of due diligence on that. My second question to you is I listened to your presentation and Dr. Watson's presentation. A couple of people have mentioned to me that they see parallels between the reading centers at the universities and the existing service centers. What differences do you see between the two?
I see partnership with the centers and the service centers, particularly in Catchment Area 1, which is Fort Hays Catchment. That is such a large land base. The collaboration is essential and necessary. So we are engaging with the service centers and utilizing their expertise to be part of this training. Remember, the centers will provide support, but they also need partnerships so that we can ensure support everywhere. And so the service centers are a vital part of that support. Ongoing, beyond letters training, will rely on the centers, the service centers, to be part of the work of the centers in general to help support educators.
Okay, thank you. Representative McNorton and Representative Getz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know that a lot of us on this committee are concerned about the 2033 date before we'll see any, or going to get any reports or see how we're doing. What would it take to tighten up that time frame that we could train instead of 1,500 a year, 3,000, whatever that number we can go up to, so we can shorten that time frame, so we can get our teachers going faster so our kids are not missing out? Is that just upping the money? I mean, is that feasible? I guess just what's your thoughts on that?
That's a worthy challenge for us. What we would need are additional literacy coaches to providing the instruction and the coaching support out in the field. If that's something that this body wants us to grapple with, we can bring back a more precise answer. But the number of coaches currently in the center's budget was based on that 1,500 number. 14 sections offered each semester with the coaching component. Now, in terms of the benchmarks, we would be committing malpractice if we didn't come back to you and say, here's where we need to be by this year, and wait till the end of this and look back and say, we didn't make it. That cannot be how we function. So those benchmarks that Representative Steele asked about are essential. The advisory committee set so that we all know where do we need to be by when to be successful. So two things, Representative McNorton. If you'd like for us to take on that challenge to say if we want to shorten that time frame to see progress more rapidly, we can do that. I also would remind the committee what Commissioner Watson said. These are incremental changes, and across the nation, people doing this work are seeing growth, but it isn't explosive growth. And so we just, it's that patient urgency. This is urgent, but we also have to be patient that our strategies are working.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lane.
I'm going to correct myself, Representative Franley. I'm sorry, I started a second column, and then I forgot that I did. I apologize. I will go to you, and then Representative Getz if time allows.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Lane, can you, over on the multi-year budget for centers, can you elaborate on the assessment, MTSS specialists? In year one, I see 85,000, and year four, it moves up to 121,000. Can you elaborate on what that is exactly, personnel would be included there?
That individual's highly likely to be a school psych or someone that's expert in the area of assessment and can help school districts look at data on a weekly basis, group kids, and use the data to make sure that the individual plans are working for children. So that's how we envision that. Someone who has the technical skills of a school psych or comparable area to help with that.
Can I add one piece? So on that piece, I believe KSDE, TASN have teams of the MTSS assessment supports. Have you checked into using any of that with these? Because they are not at an expense.
Right, they will be key partners. The difference may be that these individuals will also be able to administer the assessments, interpret the assessments, and help develop those literacy plans. But that's really good to make sure that our universities are thinking about TASN as a partner for that. So I'll take that back to them.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Representative Getz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for entertaining me again. I had this whole thing really hinges on the partnership between regions, Blueprint for Literacy Group, whatever the name of that organization is, and KSDE and the local schools. And I wondered what your feedback would be on, you know, this appropriation, not just going through the regions, but there be an appropriation to KSDE for your centers, for your work that it's coming through, and then also from the other side. If there would be a way to kind of have the marriage be also in the money of the partnership, if that would be a benefit, a hazard, it was a thought that I had a little bit, and I wondered about your feedback from that.
You identify correctly that the success of the blueprint, which, just let me remind you, is written focused on post-secondary education. So you'll if you make a change, you'd want to address that. But it relies on very close collaboration with the state board and the two boards and then the agencies working together. I will leave the wisdom of appropriations to this body.
Thank you. We are close to the end of our time. Do you have any more questions? Representative Chauncey.
Yeah, I guess as I look through this, a question for me, these centers cost on this multi-year centers of excellence, I mean, are these true costs of what we're asking, what's going to cost to operate to educate our teachers? And with that being said, as I look down this, you know, we have a Literacy Coach Foundations Course 2, which shows that there's 2 of them at a budget of $203,000 per center. We have Coach Professional Learning, 2 of them. So are we to assume then that we have 28 people that are going to be educating all our teachers throughout the state at this budget? Or do we have additional resources or additional people for training of our educators through the state? I mean, because as I read it here, it doesn't look like there's very many people to accommodate this budget to train the staff of teachers that we have throughout the state.
Keep in mind that the centers work in partnership with their university, and so the resources there, when you see the university budgets, you're going to see the allocations and how they are recommending to distribute the funding from the blueprint and what they're contributing as well. So it is a partnership between them, and so they're using resources to support, because you identify correctly, what you see just in the center's budgets may not be sufficient to meet the needs of all educators. So the universities are committing resources, partnering with the service centers and the independent colleges also have to be a key piece of this.
Okay, one quick to finish up. So then what you're saying with, if they're working in conjunction with the universities, is that more money coming out of the education budget then for the universities to help assist in paying for this for our educators? Or is that tuition funds, or where does that money from the universities come from?
Those are university commitments of their resources to support the work. And so, and Madam Chair, I thought there may be a question that they want to ask a university group, and may I ask for Dr. Frank to address that briefly, or perhaps he could talk after the meeting about how Washburn is looking at that. But this is a shared investment. Remember, shared. What's required is the blueprint funding, which is primarily, right now, the state funding, shared expertise, which is the funding and support from the university, and also the unique needs from the university. Okay. So it has to be a partnership.
Your guest may answer the question if he would like to. And please clearly state your name, title, and who you are with for our taker of the minutes.
Zach Frank. I'm the Dean of the School of Applied Studies at Washburn University. And yes, Washburn is very committed to helping to make this project work, as we see there is a definite need throughout the state, and especially in our catchment area, for improved literacy. And so, yes, we are committed to being a partner in this and for funding. And as we've adjusted our budget, that is a commitment that we have to make sure that we partner with the Blueprint and having university-funded positions and facilities and technology that can help make these centers be successful. I don't know if you have
Madam Chair, if I may. I guess it was just curiosity. I mean, I mean, obviously the university, it's state-funded part of it. Where does that money come from, though, for Washburn? Where do we come up with this money? I mean, I know you have to redo your budget, but where do we allocate the money from for the university? Because I know there's state money that goes into the universities, so are we using those resources or are you using your own?
Yeah, so we have our resources. A lot of what we're submitting is facility stuff for our things that are on our campus. We have our equipment, so I know one of the representatives talked about simulation, and so we have it's called a Milo simulator. So it's not students sitting in front of a computer, but rather we have filmed videos, so that way students interact with stuff. So imagine a police officer in a situation like that, and so interacting with that as they use it for training, so we can also use that for education. So we're committing to using those resources that are there, to taking faculty members and their salaries that the university is funding out of our typical budget, allocating that from our education, so that way our educators that are teaching pre-service students are working hand in hand with the service areas within our catchment area to find out what it is, additional resources that they need. So that way, our plan is to not just have someone who sits there and only works in the center, but they're working very closely with our experts and our faculty in the education department. And many times people would have a dual role there. And so again, that's part of the university funding. But then meeting with each of the areas, so that way we have a better understanding of what that community needs. Because as we look in our catchment area, what Atchison needs might be different than Topeka Public Schools, which is different than the Kickapoo Nation School.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you for that.
You're done. Thank you. Dr. Lane.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here, I've kind of given some thought to our conversation about the course redesign, and you may have found a loophole in the language. I can't think of a better phrase for it. And we could debate back and forth on the exact language and both have a good case to make. I would make the argument that having the course design in this budget, I feel, really does violate the spirit of the conversations that were held last spring. So you can do with that information as you please, but I am not pleased to see that there, because I feel that goes against what we talked about. You may respond.
Thank you for that. And I would suggest that you and I meet with Dr. Flanders and the K-Board team and talk through that, because there was never an intention not to honor the spirit of what is required. So future conversation, I think, will be helpful.
Thank you. And I just try to be transparent about my objections and my thoughts. Do we have any more questions? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned 3 minutes early today. Woo-hoo.
Thank you.